continue with chapter 3. We saw yesterday that sadly there is a deadly civil war between the two kings of Israel, Ishbosheth and David. But in reality, the war is not between Ishbosheth and David. The war is actually between their generals in many ways. David's cousin and general Yoav, and Ishbosheth's great uncle, Shaul's uncle and general, Abner ben Ner. And that's where chapter 3 begins. The war continues and it is fierce, and David gets going stronger, and the house of Saul grows weaker. Vayivaldu David banim bechevron, vayibecharo Amnon la'achinoam hayizraelit, u'mishneu Kilav la'Avigail eshet Naval Karmali v'ashlishi Avshalom ben Maacha bat Talmi melech Geshur. We're told that David has 3 children now, and that's showing that his kingdom is getting stronger. His oldest son is named Amnon. The second is named Chilav, and the third is named Avshalom. Interesting, Avshalom is the daughter of the king Talmai of Geshur. So he's the son of not one of these Israelite Jewish women, but of a foreign woman. We're told about his 4th son, Vavri Rivi'i Adoniah ben Chagit, Vachamishi Shifataya ben Avital, Vashitshi Yitraam le'egla eshet David, Ele Yoldu leDavid bechevron. So he has 6 children in total in Hebron. 3 of those names, Avshalom, Adoniah, and Amnon, will become important characters later on. So we'll come back to those people certainly many ways. So now that we've been told David's an illustration that David's kingdom is getting stronger, the pasuk continues. And as the battle continued between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was getting stronger in the house of Shaul. You may notice that back in verse number 1, it said David was getting stronger. So we see the power resides in the house of David with David, and the power resides in the house of Shaul with King Ishbosheth, not with Ishbosheth, but rather with Abner, the general. Ulishaul Pilegesh, in verse 7, Ushma Ritzba Bataya Vayomer al Abner Madua Batel Pilegesh Avi. Saul had a Pilegesh, a concubine, and Ishbosheth said to Abner, how could you sleep with my father's Pilegesh? How could you sleep with my father's concubine? Now, sleeping with a person's concubine is an illustration that you have now gained their position. First place we see this in the Torah is with Yaakov after the death of Rachel. Yaakov goes and it says he sleeps with Bilhah, Pilegesh Aviv. The rabbis say it doesn't mean he slept with her, it means he switched around the tents. But by sleeping with her, it shows I am now in charge of the family. I am the person in charge. I am the one who's inheriting the Pilag Shot, sort of the secondary wives. And that is what Abner is accused of by Ishbosheth, that you're trying to become king. You're trying to take my father's place. You're sleeping with his concubines. Vayitzar Abner ma'od alav de Ishbosheth. Vayomer harosh kelav anoch asher luda yom esach chesed and beit Shaul avicha el achiv el achav ve'el mar'ehu v'lo im siticha bat be b'yad David v'tifkod alai avon ha'isha hayom. And Abner was really upset. He said, am I the dog's head from Judah? I've been loyally serving you, your father, your family forever, and you're screaming at me about a woman that I slept with? Ko yaseh Elohim la'Abner v'cho yosif lo ki kasher nishba Adonai leDavid. He Cain SLO. And he swears, I'm going to do that which God has done. I'm going to swear, I'm going to ally myself with David. And Abner says, I'm going to make sure that the kingdom is transferred from the house of Saul to the house of David. So Abner is very, very bothered and says, Ishbosheth, although his name is not identified here, in his reproach of Abner, but clearly from Abner mentioning his name and from Abner's decision, Ishbosheth has nothing else that he can say, and Ishbosheth is scared of Abner. Abner, we said, is the power, and thus Abner at this point is going to try to do something different. Verse 12: Vayishlach Abner melachim el David tachtav lemor lemi aretz lemor. Karta vritcha iti v'nei yadi imach la'aseh elecha et kol Yisrael. And Abner immediately sends a note to David and says, let's make a treaty together and I will bring all of the other tribes. You only have Yehuda. I will bring the other tribes to you. Vayomer tov ani achrot itcha brit, ach davar echad lechishel meitcha lemor lo tirei panai ki im lifnei havii acha et Michal bat Shaul bevo acha lerot et panai. And David says, sounds great, but with one condition. You need to bring back my first wife, Michal. Michal is the daughter of Shaul, who was married, his second daughter to David, who, when David ran away after Michal protected him, Shaul went and gave her over to another man, Palti ben Laish. David says, if I'm going to be king, and again, we talked about this yesterday, we'll talk about it in future days, David doesn't want war. David doesn't want bloodshed. He wants to become a king of Israel peacefully. And one way of doing it is illustrating that he's not rebelling against the house of Shaul. And what better way to demonstrate that than being married to the daughter of Shaul and having her by his side. Vayishlach David, we're in 14. Malachim el Ishboshet ben Shaul lemor tonight tishti et Michal asher erasti li b'mei aralot plishtim. David sends a message to Ishboshet saying, give me my wife, who I paid a price of 100 Philistine foreskins. Remember, he came back with 200 Philistine foreskins to give to Shaul. Vayishlach Ishboshet vayitchem me'im ish me'im Palti ben Laish. And Ishboshet sent for her and took her from Palti ben Laish. Vayelech ito isha halochu volcha achareh ad bachurim. Vayomer elav Abner lech shuv vayashov. And when she was taken from this man, Palti ben Laish is crying and walking after her. He wants her to remain his wife. The Midrash talks about, the commentaries say that he never slept with her because she was a married woman, and that would be a prohibition against Torah law. But certainly it seems from here that either he loves her or he feels that he needs to protect her from David. One of the two are both possibilities. And Abner says to him, go home. And he leaves. Nobody messes with Abner. And Abner speaks to the elders and says, you guys always wanted David to be your king. And now you should do it. You should crown David as your king, because God has promised David that he will deliver Israel from the Philistines and from all their enemies. Vayedaber gam Avner ba'oznei Binyamin. And Avner also speaks to the people of Binyamin, the people who are, of course, the same tribe as Shaul, the same tribe as Ishboshet, the ones who have the most reason to have Ishboshet be the king. And they must listen to him. And now Avner goes to speak to David. He goes to enemy territory, to Hebron. Avner el David, we're in verse 20. Hebron vito esrim anashim, vayas David l'Avner v'la'anashim asher ito mishteh. So Avner comes with 20 of his men, his personal guard or whatever it might be. And David's glad to see him. They're going to conclude a treaty. Things are going to be great. And thus David makes a meal for him. And they feast together, symbolizing that, right, that now they're together, they're breaking bread, they're no longer enemies. Vayomer Avner el David akuma ve'elcha ekbatza el Adoni Amelech et kol Yisrael ve'echrutu itcha britu malchato b'chol asher taveh nafshecha vayishlach David et Avner vayelech b'shalom. So Avner says, I'm going to gather all of Israel together, and they're going to make a covenant, and they're going to appoint you as king over all of them, and you will be in charge. And David sends Avner, go and do it. He sends him bishalom, with peace. Things are going to be okay. And all of a sudden, the army comes back led by Yoav. And Abner at that point had left. They come back from a victorious battle with lots of loot. And Abner has left. We're in verse 23. And when they all returned, it was told to Yoav that Abner had come to visit the king, and the king sent him off without doing anything. And Yoav came to the king. And Yoav said to him, are you crazy? And exactly say that. He said, what did you do? How could you send Abner away? Abner is our enemy. Yadata et Avner bener ki laf totcha ba viladat et motzacha viet movaecha viladat et kol asher ata oseh. Avner is tricking you. He wants to know our defenses. He wants to know where we're going. He wants to know our plans. He doesn't have any intention of being loyal to you. So we don't really see that David says anything to Yoav. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. It's interesting, right? In this chapter, even though we said earlier, David is one who's mitchazek, Ishbosheth has nothing to say to Abner, and here David has nothing to say to Yoav. Maybe David's just not worried. This is a general. He's upset. If you remember, and this is of course, what we need to understand in this chapter, Abner killed Yoav's brother Asael. Asael was chasing him in the end of the last chapter. Yoav said, stop chasing me, stop chasing me. How am I going to be able to look your brother in the eye? What if we make peace? What if we sit down together at the table? How am I going to be able to make peace with him? Asael refuses. He's so fast, he's Usain Bolt. Abner kills him. And Yoav and Avishai, the two brothers, they chase after Abner, but they're not able to reach him. And this is at some point later. And so David doesn't say anything to Abner, but Yoav obviously has great anger against Yoav. Yoav has great anger against Abner. And so now Yoav sends for Abner. Vayeshev Abner Chevron. And Abner returns to Chevron. Now we have to understand one thing before we read what happens. Chevron is an Ir Miklat. Hebron is a city of refuge. Hebron is a place where you are not allowed to kill somebody. You're not allowed to kill somebody. It's a place of sanctuary. Nevertheless, or perhaps because of that, Abner comes back to Hebron. We're in the middle of 27. Vayatehu Yoav el toch hashar l'taber ito b'sheli. And Yoav took him aside to talk to him within the gate. He wants to talk to him privately. And what happens? Vayakehu shama chomesh. Yoav takes revenge for the killing of his brother by killing Abner, the same way it said Abner stuck into his ribs, his sword, the fifth rib, the chomesh. That's exactly what Yoav does back secretly to Abner. And so again, part of the problem here is he's doing it innocently. He's doing it in an Ir Miklat. He's doing it with somebody who believes that now they are allies. And David says, I am innocent. My kingdom is innocent forever from the blood of Avner ben Ner. Shmuel pointed this out a few days ago. All the people that maybe need to die, they die, but David is not there next to them, right? David says, I'm innocent. And David was innocent. Or maybe David planned this all along. He knew that Yoav would take out Avner. I'm not so sure about that. But again, there's always the question, the Machiavelli nature, whether David just wants to be king. But again, it seems to me the better reading is David wants to be king without spilling blood. Yachulu, we're in 29. Al Rosh Yoav, Al Kol Beit Aviv, Al Yikaret Mi Beit Yoav, Zav, Mitzoro, Machazik, Papelech, Benofel, Becher, V'chasar Lachem. May the guilt befall upon the house of Yoav, his house. May, they're going to be the ones who suffer. They're the ones who are going to be slain. I am innocent. In case we don't know, it says it again, that Yoav, why did Yoav do it? Because Abner killed Asael. But again, that was milchama. That's part of what the last word in this verse is saying. That was in milchama. This is in a time of shalom, right? David sends Abner out b'shalom. David sends him out peacefully. Abner, right, when Yoav comes back, he hears that they sent him out b'shalom. Asael was killed by milchama. There's a difference between killing somebody in war and killing somebody at a time of peace. And that's what Yoav gets terribly wrong. Vayomer David el Yoav, we're in 31. And David said, we are going to be mourning, even you, Yoav. And they lament and they wear sackcloth and they walk behind his casket. And they bury Abner in Chevron. And the king cries for him and weeps for him. And there's still to this day, there is, I don't know if it's the exact right location, but there is a place in Hebron, a memorial to Avner ben Ner. And again, a second dirge, we saw a dirge, a lament that David offered in the opening chapter of this book for Shaul and Yehonatan. And now for Avner, he says, should Avner have died the death of a naval, the death of a wicked person, Yadcha lo asurot v'raglecha lo lanechushatayim hu gashu kinfol lifnei bnei avla nafaltu v'yosifu kol ha'am nifkot alav. Your hands were not bound, your feet were not put in fetters, but you fell as one falls before treacherous men. It's like, right? You were like a prisoner of war, and they killed you with no reason, with no good. You were felled by treacherous men. This is the way that David is referring to his general. And all the troops continue crying. And David refuses to eat. He's in mourning, just like he didn't eat the night when he found out Shaul and Yonatan was killed here. He's also not eating. V'chol ha'am hikiru v'ayita b'neihem k'chol asher asa hamelech b'nei kol ha'am tov. And all the people recognized, they saw that David was upset, that David was sad, and that David is really bothered by what happened here. And everybody knew this was not the plan of David. His reaction, his response was too genuine. Vayomer HaMelech elav Adav, halo tedu kisar v'gadol nafol hayom hazeh b'Yisrael. And the Melech, the king, he says again to his servants, you know that a great prince, a great man of Israel has fallen by this day. Vanochi hayach rach umashuach melech v'anashim ha'ele b'nei tzurah kashim mimeni yishalem Adonai lo sehara kirato. And today I am weak. I might be the one who's anointed king, but the sons of Seruiah, they're savages, they're beasts, they're too difficult for me. And may God take his wickedness out upon them. So David here expresses in a couple of different ways, even though this is his general, even though this is his cousin, even though this is somebody who will defend him to the end, that he does not agree with the tactics, he does not agree with the methods and the ways of his general and his cousin Yoav. He sees it as incorrect, he sees it as wrong, he sees it as problematic. And so David here, and this is again, we said the opening chapters of this book, David is trying to unite Israel, but I think he's trying to do it without bloodshed. But sadly, no matter what he tries to do, there is bloodshed. The 24 soldiers at first, the war keeps going, and now Abner ben Ner. At a time of what should be peace, Abner is killing as if it's a time of war, and that will be something that David will come back to numerous times. In fact, he will come back to it even in a long time from now on his deathbed.